So now let me automate, okay, one more new scenario. So what is the next scenario we are going to automate? Now let me just take this page. Okay, so in a learn more, like we are having some page called as an explicit wait page. So I'm going to do the validation, like I'm just going to click on this button. Okay, so what is the name of the button? It says click here to change the text. If I click here to change the text, so the timer will be on, and after completion of the timer, okay, so it is going to like populate some message. Let's say it is populating the message called as an hello learn more aspirants. So now I need to validate this message, and when we need to validate this message, so after 10 seconds, okay, so which means, okay, so we need to ask the driver to wait for 10 seconds. So after performing this action, so we need to ask the driver to wait for 10 seconds. Okay, so or else like in your web pages, like in many web pages, whenever you do some actions, we may get some output. So let's say initially there is a field called as an status, and the initial status of the status is like kind of an open. You are doing many action, and after completing the action, the status should be changed to like kind of an open to close. So how we are going to validate it? Or in some case the button may be disabled. We need to check whether it is enable or disable. So how we are going to check? In some case, so there will be a checkbox. So either it can be checked or it can be unchecked. So how we are going to validate? So those are the things like we are going to discuss right now with the help of the new scenario. And before that, like we need to learn like one more thing. So in a Selenium, so which we call it as an timeout, or we can say it is of an waits. Okay, we need to learn about the waits. So what is the need of the wait? So generally, like what is the need of the wait is in the sense, so in order to handle the synchronization. Okay, so what is mean by, okay, synchronization? So generally, like how we are doing the automation? So we are doing the automation by interacting with the elements. So whenever we're trying to interact with the elements, so what technically it should happen? So it should load all the elements. So one and only if the element is loaded completely, we can identify the element and we can do the respective action. But assume that, okay, the element is not loaded properly, and before it getting loaded you are trying to access or you are trying to find the element. Then what happened? Either it may throw the no such element exception because that element is not loaded inside the backend HTML code, as the element is not available. So then what happened? It will throw the exception called as an no such element exception. So how we are going to avoid the no such element exception? So which means in this case, so we need to ask the WebDriver to wait for something. So why we are asking the WebDriver to wait? So that like we can avoid the synchronization issue. So synchronization issue in the sense, like whenever like we are automating, so the front end as well as the back end should load completely. Okay, so generally not only the elements, so in a web pages, like there are many hidden elements, like kind of an ajax element or the javascript element or the react or angular element. So one and only, so if these elements are loaded properly, so everything will be displayed properly in a UI. Okay, so basically it will check whether the backend elements as well as the ajax, javascript, react and angular elements are loaded. So one and only if the elements are loaded, we can do the automation. So but whenever like we are trying to access any of the web pages, right? If there is any slowness in the internet, obviously like it will take some time to load. Or else like if you notice, like whenever like we are injecting any data. So let me just take the booking website. Here let me just insert the data, the to and from, and let me just try to click on the search button. If I click on the search button after selecting the respective date, okay, so if you notice, it is taking some time to load. Okay, it is taking some time to retrieve the result. So which means like we need to ask the WebDriver to wait so till it loaded completely. And how we are going to ask the WebDriver? So in the sense with the help of the waits. So we call it as an waits or we call it as an synchronization, or in an interview they can ask how will you handle the timeout issue. So how we are going to handle in the sense with the help of two things. So one we call it as an implicit wait and other we call it as an okay explicit wait. So we are going to use the implicit wait and we are going to use the explicit wait. So what is mean by implicit wait? So the implicit wait, so we call it as an okay so global wait time, okay, or in other language they will call it as an so default wait time. So whenever like we are initializing the browser, post initializing the browser, like we need to provide some default time. So let's say I'm just providing the default time as an 5 second. So then what happened? So whenever while doing the automation, so if it is unable to find the respective element, so it will automatically wait for 5 seconds, because it may be in the assumption the element may be not loaded. So after 5 seconds, it will try to search the element. If the element is loaded within the 5 seconds, okay, then it will do the respective action and it will be navigating to the respective pages. And if the element is not loaded within the 5 seconds, so then it will throw the appropriate exception. So generally like no such element exception. Okay. So in our framework, so we need to apply the default wait time. And we need to apply the default wait time only once in a code. Okay, so only once in a code. So one and only if you apply only once in the code, it will apply to all line of code. So, okay, so if you apply only once in a code, it will apply to the all line of code. So whenever it is unable to find the element, so automatically so the default wait time will be applied. And how we are going to apply the default wait time in the sense with the help of the implicit wait. Whereas there is another wait called as an explicit wait. So we call it as an specific wait time. Okay. So generally this implicit wait is applicable to like all line of code. Okay. So whenever like it's unable to find the element, it will apply to the all line of code. If the element is loaded, then it won't wait. So if the element is not loaded, it will wait for the 5 seconds. But there is something called as an explicit wait. Okay. So it will be apply wait to the specific line of code. That is the reason we call it as a specific wait time. So for example, like as I told, so in this web page, right, so I need to click on this button. Okay, so after clicking on this button, I need to explicitly wait for 10 seconds, which is nothing but we are waiting more than the implicit wait. So which means we need to wait for 10 seconds, which means for the specific line. So which means here we are going to apply the explicit wait. Okay, so where is another case? Here it says, right, after performing this button will be enabled after 12 seconds. So we need to check whether the button is enabled or disabled after 12 seconds. So which means we need to ask the WebDriver to wait for the 12 seconds. So which means the random times are involved for the specific line of code. Okay, so we are going to apply the wait for the specific line of code. Whenever we apply the wait for the specific line of code, we call it as an explicit wait. So generally this explicit wait we also call it as an dynamic wait time. Okay, because like in each and every line we are changing the wait time. And how we are going to apply this explicit wait in the sense in a Selenium, so we are having some class called as an WebDriver wait. Okay, and with the help of the class we are going to apply the explicit wait. And while using the class, so we are going to do one more verification. So which is nothing but we are going to do the re-verification whether the expected condition is met. Okay, so what is mean by expected condition? So we can check whether the field is enabled or the disabled, or it is loaded or not loaded, or displayed or not displayed. So likewise we can set the expected conditions. Okay, so we are going to check the expected condition, and only if the expected condition is satisfied, then it will continue the execution. So now let us try to implement it up. So now we are going to automate the new scenario, and all the buttons or all the fields are present in the new page, which means for page specific we need to create a page object. Okay, so class files, which is nothing but the class file. So now as a first step, what I'm going to do, I'm just navigating to the page object folder. I'm adding a new page object. Let it be kind of an learn more. Okay, so explicit page. So I'm creating it up. Whenever like we create a new class file, we need to call the class inside the manager. So which manager? Page object manager. So in order to call the class, I'm just creating the method over the page object manager. So public void. Okay, I'm just giving the method name as, so get learn more explicit page. Okay, so now inside which I'm going to create an object for the class. What is the name of the class? It's a learn more explicit page. So I'm just typing learn more explicit page is equal to new of learn more explicit page. Now to this class, okay, we need to pass the knowledge of the driver. So I'm going to inject the knowledge of the driver, and just I'm making this as a global variable. So whenever we are making as a global variable, so always use the appropriate access modifier. Let the access modifier may be the public. Okay. So now in this case, I'm just assigning, I'm making this a global variable. Now we need to return this. I'm just adding the return statement. So return of learn more explicit weight. And whenever we are adding the return statement, so the return type should be added. So the return type can be class. So either we can return the entire class or the string or the integer, whatever it is, we can return. Okay, we are returning it. So now we are going to pass the driver knowledge to this particular class. So whenever we pass the knowledge, okay, so initially what happened, the constructor call should happen, which means inside this learn more explicit weight page we need to create a constructor. So I'm just creating the constructor. Okay, so the constructor name should be same that of the class name. Okay, it's an learn more explicit page. So from the suggestion, just I'm typing it up, and then okay, I'm just passing the knowledge of the WebDriver to this current class. So I'm just getting the driver knowledge, and whatever the driver knowledge which I got, I need to share it across this class. How we are going to share it across the class? By creating the global variable. Okay, so WebDriver, okay, driver. So if we need to call this global instance, we will be using the keyword called as and this I can say. So this dot driver is equal to driver. So now we have called the local instance, and we have assigned the local instance to the global instance. Okay, so now whatever the action we are going to perform, for each and every action, like we need to create a methods in the page object. So now the page object manager is throwing the error. Okay, so now the errors are rectified. So let me check is there is any other error. Okay, so we have missed the semicolon at the end. Let me add the semicolon. So now the errors is rectified. So whenever you are writing any of the coding, if there is any error in the class file, so fix this as a first priority and then do the coding. Okay, so whenever like you are doing the coding, so there should not be error in any of the class file. So even though you are not working in that class file, so you should rectify the errors and then you need to create the coding. So now here we are going to create the mechanism. So mechanism in the sense like whatever the possible action we are going to do, for each and every action, like we are going to create a method. So now what is the action I'm going to do? So I'm planning to click on this, click change to text. Okay, now I'm right clicking and inspecting it, and then I'm just writing the code for it. So it is having the id called as an quote. So I'm using the css selector. If I say hash of quote, okay, so then it will check for an id, because special notation of the css filter has indicates the id. Okay, the id is unique. So by this way we can click on the change text. So I'm writing the method to click on the change text. So let it be like kind of an, okay, so public void, click change text button. Okay, so now I'm just writing the button like driver dot find element by dot CSS selector. I'm using the CSS selector syntax and I'm just performing the click operation. Okay, so after performing the click operation, what we are going to do? So we are going to like validate the change in text. Okay, so just we are going to validate so whether this text is present or not. So now let us try to identify this. So let me just use the text of syntax. So I'm just using the different syntax so that you can practice all type. So I'm just giving the tag name like text of is equal to something. But when this text syntax will be enabled, so after 10 seconds, okay, so which means like we need to apply the time issues. So now let me just get change text. Okay, so just I'm adding the method for the same and then I'm writing the syntax like driver dot okay find element by dot, it's an h path syntax, right? I'm just writing the h path and then I'm just using the method called as an get text. I'm using the get text method. Okay, so now whenever we are adding the get text, so we should return the output because get text is having the return type so that we can do the validation. So rather than adding the return in the different line, I'm just adding in the same line because you need to store in a string and then you need to return the string. So why to have an additional line? So let's add a return statement in the same line. I'm just adding the return type. So the return type is changed to the string. Okay, so now we have done. So now how we are going to call this? So obviously like we need to do the test design. So same in the learn more page. Okay, right? I'm creating the new scenario. So in the scenario, like we are going to validate the change in text. Okay. So now let me just add over here like change in text validation. Okay. Let me just add the given statement. So user clicks on change text button, then validate the change text value. Okay, so likewise I have written it
So,
and I need to map
Arvind,
the
shouldn't
coding.
we, Arvind, sorry to interrupt, shouldn't
Yes,
we be doing this in the first place? They creating the feature
that is
file?
your
If,
choice. If you know the flow, so whatever the
mm,
flow you want to follow, so you can follow it up. Okay,
mm,
so either you can do the test design and then you can create the page object, or else like you can create the page object and then you can do the test design. Okay, that is purely the user choice, but it is better to start with the test design. That is the good way because as a beginner, like start with the thing. Okay, so now what I have done, I have mapped the given statement in the different step definition and when statement in the different step definition. So will it work? Yes, for sure it will work because whatever the step definition we are going to call initially, it will call the context. Okay, so it will work. So I'm just not wish to confuse now. We can discuss in the next example. Now let me just map everything in the same thing. If it is even learn more, let us use the learn more step. Now here we are going to call. How we are going to call? So in the given statement, I'm just calling the context. Inside the context, we are calling the page object manager, and inside the page object manager, we are calling the get learn more explicit wait page, and inside which initially like we are going to click on the change text. So now if I say click change text, so this particular method will be available. Now we need to validate this change text. So now I'm just adding the context. I'm calling the page object manager and then like I'm calling the method called as an get learn more explicit page. If you just type, you will get the suggestion. Okay, so I'm just typing partially and from the suggestion I'm choosing it up and then so we need to click on we need to get the text, right? I'm just using the method called as a get change text. Now I'm just using in the assertion. So straight away let me use in the assertion. So assert dot Okay, so asset equals, so actually inside this asset equals method, right? So there is a concept called as an polymorphism, so which I will explain. Okay, actually here the polymorphism play a role. So now in the expected message, let me give the expected message of it. Okay, so now we are doing the validation. Now if I try to run the script, for sure it is going to fail, because after executing the given statement, it will execute the then statement immediately. But when this then statement will get loaded, so the then statement will be loaded, okay, after, okay, 10 seconds, which means we need to add a time. But this time we haven't added any wait time. So whenever there is no wait time, so then what happened? The WebDriver won't wait. Okay. So after performing the click operation, it will immediately try to search the text. It will immediately check whether the text message is present or not. Okay. So now let's see how the execution goes, and the scenario maybe fail at the then statement. So the reason is like, as the element is not loaded, because the element will load only after the 10 second, but we are trying to access the element before 10 second. If that is the case, what happened? It obviously throw the error. So sorry, I forgot to update the URL. So let me just update the URL first. Okay, let me just the updating URL. So now I am just updating the URL directly. But when you are working in the real time, we should follow the navigation, because every time we will be landing in the home page. From the home page, like we need to traverse to the, you need to click on the practice page, and then like we need to click on the respective field, and then it will be navigating to the page. So we'll be following the flow. But considering the time frame, like I'm just straight away I'm pausing the URL of the respective page. Okay, but when you are automating, like you will be automating from the home pages. So now let me just rerun this particular scenario. So now if we rerun it, so it should pick the particular scenario, because like we have provided the tag. Yes, it has picked the respective scenario, and the constructor call everything will happen. Now it should invoke the browser, and post invoking the browser, it will be navigating to the URL. Now it should click on the button. Okay, so now let's see like whether it is clicking on the button or not. Okay, the button is clicked. That is why the timer is running. Okay, but at the back end, if you notice, immediately the scenario get failed. So what is the error? So it is getting no such element exception, and it says unable to like get the text. Okay. So why we are getting the no such element exception? Because the corresponding field will enable after 10 seconds. So we need to ask the WebDriver to wait for the 10 seconds. So how we are going to ask the WebDriver? So with the concept of the like implicit wait and explicit wait, as I told, so the implicit wait is an default wait time. So we should define only once in a code. So where we are going to define this implicit wait? So generally we used to like initialize the implicit wait during the browser invocation. We know where the browser invocation code is present. So under the utils package, we are having the WebDriver manager. So where we have written the code for the navigating to the URL and maximize it. After maximizing, here I'm just going to apply the default weight. Okay, because so once we initialize the default weight, wherever the slowness occur, okay, so it will apply the weight. So let's say how we can apply with the help of the driver, and inside which we are having the method called as an manage, and inside the manage method we are having the method called as an times out, and inside the times out we are having the method called as an implicit wait. But if you notice, the implicit wait is an parameterized method. So it is asking us to pass something called as a duration. So based upon the naming conversion, okay, you can see the duration starting with the Pascal case, which means it is a class. It is asking us to pass the duration class. So now I'm just passing the class called as a duration, and if I type dot, it will list down all the methods present inside the class. So it is having duration of second, between, from, etc. So hours, milliseconds, etc. So generally, like we used to wait for a seconds. So I'm just using the method called as an off seconds, and we can provide the default wait of 5 seconds. Okay, so now what I'm doing, I'm just applying the 5 seconds. So now if I execute the code, right? Okay, so while execution, so the code will run for, or the code will wait for additional 5 seconds, because it is unable to find the element. Whenever something is unable to locate, then automatically, so the default wait time will be applied. But the maximum wait time of default time is 5 seconds. So it means, which means after 5 seconds it will check for the presence of the element. So if the element is not there, again it is going to throw the exception, because so the default wait time, the maximum wait time of the implicit is 5 seconds. If you notice, so it is throwing, and also if you notice, the code is still running. It is not throwing the immediate error, but now it is throwing the error because it waited for the 5 seconds. So automatically, so wherever the slowness occur, or wherever it is unable to find the element, so automatically, okay, the default time will be applied. But after 5 seconds, it again throw the same error. So why it's again throw the same error? So because like it is unable to find the element. So again it's throwing the same error, which means we need to wait some more additional time. We need to wait more than the default wait time. So we, if that is the case, we will be using the wait called as an explicit wait. Okay, so we should use the explicit wait, and the explicit wait is applied to the specific line of code. Now where we need to apply this explicit wait? So obviously, like after, okay, clicking this action before checking the text. Okay, so before checking this text, so we need to wait. Okay, how many times, how many minutes we need to wait? So we need to like wait for like 10 seconds. If it is often 10 seconds, we can, let's say, as a, we can wait for the 12 seconds, so that it will be get loaded completely. So we need to wait for 12 seconds. So how we can apply the weight to the specific line? So with the help of the WebDriver weight, as I told, like we are having something called as an WebDriver weight. I'm using the WebDriver weight. Actually the WebDriver weight is a class. So whenever like we need to use one class in other class, so we should create the object for the class. So I'm just calling, creating the object for the class called as an WebDriver weight. I'm giving the variable name called as an driver weight is equal to new of WebDriver weight. Okay, so now I have added the object creation part, and if you notice the import statement, okay, it is importing from the Selenium. Okay, it is belonging to the Selenium, the classes belong to the Selenium. But after adding the particular line, okay, still it throws the error, because whenever we create an object, so this class may have the constructor, and that constructor is accepting two input. So it is asking us to pass the two input. One is of an WebDriver and another is of an duration, because only to the WebDriver we need to say wait for this time. So as we need to inform to the WebDriver, so we are sharing the knowledge of the driver and how many seconds we need to wait. So whenever like we say seconds or the minutes, we should inject the time only with the help of the duration class. I'm just using the duration class, and I'm using the method called as an off seconds. Okay, so in a real time we always use the half seconds, and let me ask us to wait for 12 seconds. Okay, so now after this 12 seconds, whenever we are using the WebDriver wait, right, whenever you are using not a WebDriver wait, we call it as an explicit wait. We can add some condition. Okay, so one and only if the condition is satisfied, we can execute the next line. If the condition is not satisfied, so then it will throw the like timeout exception. Okay, so in order to do so, like we are going to add some conditional check. So whereas in the implicit wait, right, sorry, in an in an implicit wait, we are not doing any conditional check, but here we are going to do the conditional check. So what is the variable name of the WebDriver wait? It is driver wait. So I'm just typing the driver wait, and inside which we will be having a method called as an until. Okay, and inside the until method we are going to set the expected condition. Okay, so I'm just going to set the expected conditions. So if you type expected condition, or else if you just type from the suggestion, you will be getting like expected condition. Okay, so you can type from the get it from the suggestion. It is a class, and the class contains the method. And if I click on the dot, so there are n number of methods are available. So you can choose any of the method, depends upon our need. In case like in few web pages, if the title is getting delayed, so you can check whether the title is loaded or not by selecting the title is. Or if you are planning to check the alert is loaded or not, you can check is the alert is present. Or if you need to validate whether the alert is there, so we can use it over there. So likewise we are having n number of methods. So depends upon our need, we can use it any of the method. But if you use this method called as an presence of element located by, so it will work for all the condition. So which is nothing but like we are just checking whether the element is loaded or not. So I'm just using the method called as an presence of element located. Okay, so there are n number of methods. Like if you notice, so there will be n number of methods. So let's say it says the element to be clickable. So for example, if you are planning to do the click operation, so then you can use this method and you can specify the locator, so that before performing the click operation, it will verify whether the locator is loaded or not. And in case if you are planning to check whether the particular field, particular web element is present, so there is another method called as an visibility of. So you can use the visibility of the element locator or the presence of element locator. So likewise you can use any of the method, or else in a generic you can use this method called as an presence of element locator. So now inside which we need to specify the locator which we are checking. What is the locator we are checking? Obviously the below one, right? So one and only if this locator is available. Okay, so then we need to like get the text. So now I'm just specifying the locator. So by dot xpath, or else like just I'm copy pasting the entire line. Okay, so by dot xpath we are just giving the regular expression of the xpath, and at the end I'm adding the semicolon. So now what happened? Okay, so now our WebDriver will wait for 12 seconds, and after 12 seconds it will check the element. So which is nothing but it will check the locator which we have specified, and if the locator is available, then it will execute the next step. If the element is not located, then it will throw the timeout exception. Okay, so now okay, let me okay try to instead of giving the 9 seconds, so what I'm going to do, I'm just making it as of an like kind of an 7 seconds. Okay, so if I say 7, so it doesn't indicates like implicit wait plus explicit wait, which means it is not going to wait for the 12 minutes. So if it is of an implicit wait, so if the implicit wait is applied, it will consider only the implicit wait. If the explicit wait, if we are voluntary applying some wait, then it will consider only the voluntary wait time. Okay, so it will consider only this dynamic wait time. So now our code will wait for like how many seconds? It will wait for 7 seconds. But we are not meeting the condition, because like we need to wait for more than 10 seconds, right? Now let's see whether our scenario is getting pass or getting failed. So now let us check that. So if not, like we can increase the time accordingly. So obviously the expectation is like, so it will wait for 7 seconds. Okay, so now it will do the click operation. Okay, so now after performing the click operation, so still there is no error, because so it is waiting for the 7 seconds. If the element is loaded within the 7 seconds, okay, it will click. So which means, so it has added the it has waited for the 7 seconds. So now as it is satisfied, so this condition, basically this element has been loaded, I guess. So that is the reason like it has been added up. and that is the reason it has been paused. So which means like within the 7 seconds maybe this element is getting loaded, so which means I guess it has considered the implicit wait time as well. Okay, so that is the reason it has paused. It is considering the implicit wait time along with the explicit wait, so which means like it has waited for close to 12 seconds. So that is the reason like this particular line get paused. So which means like whenever like you are planning to wait for the certain time, so then obviously like you should use the WebDriver wait. Okay, so which is nothing but like we are using the explicit wait, so we are voluntarily we are waiting. So in other case, here if I click on this button, here I need to wait for an 12 second, so which means like by default it will wait for the 5 seconds because implicit wait will be auto applied. After that, as we have specified the explicit wait, it will consider the explicit wait time as well. Okay, so which means nowadays it is considering the as a first process, it is considering the implicit wait, which is nothing but the default wait time. And after the default wait time, if there is an additional wait time, and how we are specifying the additional wait time with the help of the WebDriver wait, then it will wait for the additional wait time. And after waiting for the additional wait time, okay, so it is checking for the text called as an whether this text is available. If the text is available, it is performing the operation. So to verify that, what we can do one more negative testing. Let me give the duration of second as 1. Okay, so now the time of the implicit will be 5 and the explicit will be 1. So commonly like it will be wait for kind of an 6 seconds. Now let's see like whether the test case is getting failed or not. So by this way we can conclude whether it is considering the time of the implicit as well. Okay, so now let's see. So altogether the wait time is kind of an 6 seconds. So now the expectation is like the scenario should get failed. Now let's see whether it is getting failed or not. It is navigating to this particular web page. Okay, fine. Then it will be maximizing. It will be clicking on the button. Let's say 1, 2, 3. It's going to wait for the 6 seconds. So now if you see, it has failed because after 6 seconds it has checked for the expected condition. Okay, so what the expected condition we have given? We have given whether this element is located. As the element is not available, it will throw the exception called as a timeout exception. So whenever there is a timeout exception, it says timeout exception, expected condition fail, waiting for the presence of element. Okay, so whenever the timeout exception occurs, so you need to keep changing the dynamic value. Okay, so always have some increased second in the dynamic value. If you need to wait for 10 seconds, so don't give it as a 10 seconds, so have it as 12 second. Okay, so by this way we can avoid the failures in the worst cases. Okay, so this is how like we will be using the weights in the Selenium. So depends upon our need, so like we will be using the explicit weight. So whenever we need to apply the weight for that specific line, we always use the explicit weight. But by default, so the default wait time will be applied, so which we call it as an implicit wait. So now everyone get an idea like how we are using the weights in the real time. So whenever you are automating any of the web page, so if you need to wait, so then we should use the explicit wait. Even in this case, right? So if I navigate to this book.spicejet and if I search something, so let me search the city as Chennai and 2 as Ahmedabad, and I'm just giving the date, and then I'm clicking on the search button. So now if I need to do the validation in the next screen, okay, so till this, okay, so till this page get load, so we need to add a wait. So before performing any of the actions here, right, so we need to do the, we should apply the wait. So why we are applying the wait? Because if it takes more than the implicit wait, then we should add a explicit wait. But in this case, right, it is loaded within the 5 seconds. But we will get to know one and only if we try to automate it up. So if it is getting failed, then we should apply the voluntary wait time, so which is nothing but the dynamic wait, which is nothing but we need to apply the explicit waits. Okay, so depends upon the conditions, so we will be applying the weights in the various places. So this is how, like, we will be using the weights concept. So wherever required, so you can apply the weight to the specific line of coding. So this dynamic weight is applied only to this specific line of code and not to the all line of coding.
So this page, I mean, this page load, we mentioned about that wait, right? When you
Hmm,
click on something, it opens a new page and there is a wait time required for the new page to load, right?
hmm.
So that's a different concept, right? The page load wait.
Page load wait is also obviously the implicit will take care. What is when we page load? So whenever it is a page is loading, technically, like if you see, like I'm just this is the locator which we are having, right? This is, sorry, this is the backend code which you are having. So now if I reload the page, okay, what did happen? It is reloading the elements. So both are same, which means like uh, till the page load completely, so the element will be refreshed and the element will be available. Now you would see it's taking some time to load the elements. So now all the elements are available as the page is loaded completely, so the elements is loaded completely. So that is what, in case if the sync up is not there, automatically the implicit wait will be applied, so we don't need to care about it. So automatically the implicit wait will take care of it. So whenever the slowness occurs, so obviously the implicit wait will happen. But if after 5 seconds, if the still, if the pages keep on loading, so then it will fail. If that is the same behavior, that is the same behavior which you are facing every time, then you need to handle the mechanism with the help of the waits. Okay, so you need to ask uh, we need to ask the WebDriver to wait for an additional time. By this way, like, we can avoid the wait, avoid the timeout issue.